Hello and welcome to the fabulous Friday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. We made it. I'm glad you're able to spend some time with us here as we get you set up for your weekend on another sunny day in and around HRM. Boy, what a heartbreaking loss. Did you watch the game yesterday? I think many Canadians were watching in various places around the country, at home, at work, in the restaurants and in the bars, and it was just the worst possible way to lose a hockey game, isn't it? I mean, Team Canada came into the game as the distinct underdog, right? They had lost earlier in the tournament 5-0 to the U.S. and was a different team, at least I think, for the first half of the game. Managed to score shorthanded, and then they were protecting their lead and came within 3 minutes of hoisting the gold medal. And the Americans scored on a beauty tip, and then overtime. And I think this is something that Canadians are going to discuss for some time. And I hope that the IIHF takes a look at these overtime periods, at least in the gold medal game. I understand scheduling. I understand that, if we have games that go 2 and 3 periods long, that it throws the whole thing out of whack. I understand that. But it's the gold medal game. Why do we have to play 3-on-3? Imagine 4 years you have worked to get to that point. You go all the way through the preliminary rounds, all the way through the quarters and the semis, and you get to the gold medal game, and you get to overtime, and then you have to play 3-on-3. The NHL doesn't even do it in the postseason. Why does the IIHF do it? Not to say that it would have changed the outcome. Not to say that Team Canada would have won that game. But it just seems like the worst possible way to lose a hockey game is through shootout, in my opinion. Second worst way is to lose on these 3-on-3s, overtime. I get it, exciting for the fans. I get it that it's, and again, I mentioned it earlier. It's a time thing, and they have games that they don't want to delay. But boy, what a way to lose. Anyway, hockey fans don't have a whole lot of time to recover. 11:40 this morning, the men's team is back on the ice in their semifinal match against Finland. And they will be in tough in that game as well. The Finns, not a bad team at all. Still haven't heard if Sydney's going to play. I haven't, mind you, I haven't checked in the last little bit here. But we do know that it's going to be, it's a do or die, right? These semifinals are can be heartbreakers as well. So I imagine many of you will be perhaps taking a pause if you're at work today, or gathering around your television set at home and to watch that game today as we cheer on Team Canada. Rachel Homan currently on the ice right now. I'm watching it out of the corner of my eye. She's in a semifinal match against Sweden, who she has beaten already once in this tournament, and it's still very early on, so it's hard to say how that game's going. Anyway, this is the semifinal in curling. The winner goes on to play the gold medal game, which we saw Brad Jacobs do yesterday. And the loser goes on to play the bronze match. So we'll keep an eye on Rachel Homan as we roll along here on this Friday edition. Looks like we're in for some weather too, right? Looks like beautiful day out there today. Some melting going on, sunshine, not a lot of cloud in the sky. But there's one of those storms lurking out there, and it's working its way to our part of the world. Doesn't look like it's going to impact the weekend weather. In fact, it's probably not going to impact the commute to work on Monday morning, but if the forecast holds true, it will impact the afternoon commute on Monday and into Tuesday. Environment Canada has issued a special weather statement for our region, which stretches through most of the province, so you take it with as you will, but it's calling for anywhere 15 to 25 centimeters of snow to begin Monday afternoon and carry on and through to Tuesday morning. So Allister Aalders, our meteorologist, will be stopping by the show in hour number 3 today. to give us the very latest. These storms are so track dependent. I know we talk about it all the time, but the storms are very track dependent, and a little bit of a shift like we saw last weekend or the weekend before, and we can go from snowmageddon to nothing. So Allister will be watching those charts and will be joining us afternoon today to bring us the very latest. Daniel Smith is in the news. The Premier of Alberta taking to the television airwaves last night to tell Albertans and people in Ottawa that her province will go to a ballot box in the fall on a referendum, not over separation. That process is still underway. But the Premier laying out 9 different questions that, I almost said Nova Scotians, that Albertans are going to be asked. That came out of that survey that they did. They did a study earlier last year that came up with these questions. Anyway, a bunch of different areas that this thing is going to focus on. A couple of the highlights out of the package is that one of the questions will to see Alberta take more control over immigration, giving preference to economic migrants, and giving Albertans a first priority to new employment opportunities, granting eligibility for provincially funded programs in health, education, and social services only to citizens, permanent residents, and people with a quote, Alberta-approved immigration status. Not entirely clear what that means. The Premier didn't elaborate on what that meant yesterday. Setting up a 1-year residency requirement before anyone who isn't a citizen or permanent resident that can qualify for provincial social support programs. Charging people with non-permanent immigrant status a fee or a premium to access health care. And the one that raised the biggest question in my eyes, requiring proof of citizenship before an elector can cast a ballot in a provincial election. It sounds like she's concerned that people that aren't Canadian citizens are voting in provincial elections. But if you go to Elections Alberta's website, right on the front page, it has a great big Canadian maple leaf saying that you have to be a Canadian citizen. So, also a couple of things federally that I think is more just throwing meat to the base, and that is we know the justices, choosing justices thing she's been talking about. That question will be asked. They'll be asked if we should abolish the Senate and asking if provinces could drop out of federal programs dealing with health, education, and social services while still receiving federal funding, and giving provincial laws priority over conflicting federal legislation in areas of provincial or shared constitutional authority. Those are the nice-to-haves, I think. And the study has begun on if you can even do it. To abolish the Senate in Canada, you need to have all provinces and territories agree. And I've been around here for 50 years or so. I know many of you may be around longer. When is the last time that all the provinces agreed on something? Not to mention that we would require for some of these questions to be answered and to be enacted, we would require us to open the Constitution, which is a can of worms in itself. Anyway, Daniel Smith in the news again today. And we'll ask Tim about this. It might be something that you want to talk about here on the program as we roll forth on the fabulous Friday edition. Allister will be here. Cecil will be here in hour number 3 as well to give his thoughts on yesterday's hockey game and today's hockey game. It'll be underway, so we'll have to haul him away from his television set so that he'll join us. I'm sure it'll be on in the background. And Tim Powers will be here today as well to talk to us and share a little bit about the week in Ottawa, and I'm sure he'll have something to say about the referendum questions that the Premier of Alberta released to the people of Nova Scotia or of Alberta yesterday. So all of that and more coming up on the program. We're going to take our first break here on the show, and when we come back, a conversation with the Attorney General for Canada and, of course, Nova Scotia MP Sean Fraser. Some money being handed out to the defense industry in our part of the world, and Minister Fraser was here or is here to hand out that money. We'll dig into that, and maybe we'll ask him some questions about what's going on in Ottawa as well. Attorney General Sean Fraser, your guest when we come back. It's Friday. See you in a bit. As we get you set up for the weekend and roll along today, an announcement in our part of the world. It's being touted as strengthening Atlantic Canada's defense capabilities in Nova Scotia. About $4 million being earmarked for companies in our part of the world that specialize in defense and defense contracting. And the minister that is here to hand out said check is on the phone with me now. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show the Honorable Sean Fraser. Sean, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate the time here. Tell me a little bit about this, Sean. How did these companies qualify for this type of funding?
Yeah, so first, the announcement yesterday takes place in the context of the recently released Defense Industrial Strategy, which is focusing on a major pivot to ensure, as we ramp up defense spending to help ensure we can meet Canada's sovereignty needs, we want to make sure that we buy Canadian and procure products that are manufactured by Canadian workers that develop benefits for Canadian communities. Yesterday's announcement is part of that strategy because it focuses not just on building major warships or manufacturing fighter jets, but it helps plug in small and medium-sized businesses into the supply chain. So this is through a program, it's called the Regional Defense Innovation Initiative, that's specifically targeting Atlantic Canadian companies to help them develop technology that might have a civilian application today that can pivot towards a military use. This is a $40 million fund for Atlantic Canada, and the first $4 million was rolled out to support 9 Nova Scotia-based companies yesterday, and it's just incredible. The technology that they're developing that's putting people to work right here, right now, going to allow them to achieve a scale in the future by rolling these products out not just to the Canadian military, but to our allies around the world.
Is this frontline logistics stuff? Is this frontline equipment that we would see, soldiers in Canada and sailors in Canada using day to day?
So it depends on the specific project. So there's one example that at Sensor Technology, who actually hosted the announcement yesterday. They have submarine acoustics technology that's powered by AI that will allow. It looks like a long tube, but it's got some pretty sophisticated equipment in it. It would allow them to detect underwater noise. It was originally developed to protect the marine environment and marine mammals against shipping traffic and other dangers, but it's perfect for detecting threats to underwater critical infrastructure or to anti-submarine warfare. This is the kind of thing that's going to allow Canada to better protect its interests by defending that infrastructure or defending against submarine threats should we be involved in any marine warfare in the future. Other satellites that are being launched into space, potentially from Nova Scotia in the future, that are going to allow us to gather information from around the world based on the tech that they're developing now. There's 9 different companies, and the range of things are as broad as those examples that I've indicated. Suffice it to say, it's really developed not with a specific application in mind, but trying to figure out who's making things now that we actually could use to deliver better security outcomes and maximize the economic benefit at the same time.
Sean, no offense to L&M Highland Outfitters here in Nova Scotia, been around since the 60s, but one of these grants is going to a company that produces Highland garb, sporrans, and kilt pins. That certainly will make the forces look good, but I wonder if that's going to protect us from threats.
Yeah, so that's it's interesting. As a bagpiper of now 30-something years, I found it interesting when I saw an L&M on the list of successful recipients. But they actually have needs to fulfill a significant Canadian defense contract. The military has needs not just for ceremonial garb and sporrans and kilts, but a number of other different products and tech Canadian manufacturers can and should provide. Realistically, that is of the $4 million, represents about a $50,000 loan to help with the cost of certain equipment to produce the gear that they've contracted for more quickly. So it's not the biggest recipient of the bunch, but nevertheless, even when we are procuring boots and uniforms, we should be looking to Canadian suppliers first to make sure that we're creating jobs for people who call Canada home.
Sean, you mentioned this is just a small part of a larger pile of money that is earmarked for Atlantic Canada. Do we know, is there a roadmap when we'll see more of these announcements and perhaps be talking about this again?
Yeah, there's a few more Nova Scotia-based announcements that will roll out to local companies over the next few weeks. We've got successful recipients that have been identified in the other Atlantic provinces that over the course of the next month or so will be made public. And that would represent the first of 3 years of funding through the program once that first tranche of announcements are rolled out over the next few weeks or months. But in addition to this very specific fund that's designated for Atlantic Canada, there are enormous opportunities with the broader defense industrial strategy. A lot of people don't realize this. With only 6.5% of the population of the country in Atlantic Canada, we're actually home to 20% of the jobs in the aerospace and defense sector. When we ramp up spending more broadly in defense and security, Atlantic Canada stands to disproportionately benefit far more than this one announcement would represent.
Minister Fraser, I've had a conversation with the Premier. I've had a conversation on the air with the Mayor, who are both very excited about the potential for defense spending, given your government's pledge to hit 2% GDP and more moving forward. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of speculation about a submarine contract and a repair facility. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, that's going through the process right now. There's a series of different major procurement opportunities, but Atlantic Canada certainly has the potential to benefit. I know these kinds of contracts often are more valuable on the service support than they are for the actual manufacture of the equipment that you purchase. And my own view is that Nova Scotia is positioned perfectly to offer solutions. Now, that's obviously going to be the subject of a competitive bid. There are two remaining suppliers who are going through the process. But I think there's significant opportunity for us to see more work coming to Nova Scotia as a result of not just potential submarine contracts, but in shipbuilding, in aerospace and aircraft manufacturing and maintenance. There are enormous opportunities for the region, including but not limited to the submarine issue that you identified.
Sean, is there potential for expansion of facilities here? I'm thinking Shearwater, I'm thinking Greenwood, I'm thinking the dockyard.
Look, certainly there are, but it depends on the specific needs of the individual bases. I know there's obviously some work going on in and around Greenwood with respect to housing, but you want to make sure that you don't make decisions behind closed doors as elected officials about what you think needs to happen, but you listen to the needs of the senior officials within the Canadian Armed Forces who can tell you where the capability gaps are, who can tell you what the needs of members of the forces really are and where you should direct that spending, not just to leave a pile of money in a given community, but to actually create jobs while you improve the ability of the Canadian Armed Forces to deliver the security outcomes you want for Canada and its allies. So this is going to be a process where we follow significantly the advice of the people who manage the Canadian Armed Forces, who are responsible for the safety and security of Canadians. But if we can meet those needs and drive economic opportunities for people who call Nova Scotia home at the same time, we'll be moving in the right direction.
Mr. Fraser, switching hats back to the Attorney General portfolio. Like last night, the Alberta Premier took to the television airwaves and suggested that Alberta would be going to a referendum in the fall on about 9 different questions, many of them focusing on immigration and having more Alberta control on these files. Your thoughts on Premier Smith's pronouncements yesterday?
Well, look, I first want to have an opportunity to delve more deeply into the issue with the advice of officials in our department. But I understand that people in different parts of the country want to ensure that their provinces' voices are represented, not just when it comes to provincial decision-making, but when it comes to the federal government as well. But that is something that happens now and to a significant degree. When we're going to take decisions, even decisions that are exclusively within the purview of the federal government, we work hard to ensure that we actually solicit feedback from different levels of government. When you look, for example, at the engagement with provinces, including Alberta, including Nova Scotia, on decisions around immigration, we would always have formal roundtables with each of the provinces to ask them what their needs are, reflect the feedback that we hear in changes to federal policy where appropriate, including, for example, to the numbers of provincial nominees through the immigration program that the provinces control. But it's not limited to any one policy area. We want to engage. We want to hear the honest perspectives of governments, regardless of partisan affiliation, regardless of geography, to ensure the decisions that we take reflect the interests of people in every part of the country. So I'll look forward with interest to digging deeply into the Premier Smith's statements yesterday in respect to the questions she's going to be posing. But in the meantime, we have a responsibility to engage with provinces meaningfully, and in my view, we do that effectively.
What's your opinion on referendums like this and their legality, Minister Fraser? Like, one of the questions is to abolish the Senate. That requires opening the Constitution, doesn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And look, if there is a clearly expressed will of citizens of a given province, we always want to take that feedback into account and in good faith. But my view is that we have a number of different ways that we can do that. I always like to engage personally with my counterparts in different provinces. We do have certain legal obligations that were outlined in the Supreme Court case involving the secession reference regarding Quebec a number of years ago. But provincial governments will make decisions that they are entitled to make, and the federal government will make decisions that are within its purview. But my view with respect to our Constitution is it's done a pretty good, albeit imperfect job of establishing a federation that largely works. We have the ability to engage across cultures, across languages, across provinces, and across political parties to come to decisions through a process that's been established by the Constitution of Canada that's served us well over the course of our more than 150-year history. I would hesitate to move away in any significant fashion to a document that served our interests so well.
You gonna watch a hockey game this morning?
Can't wait. Go Canada, go.
Right
my
on.
goodness, heartbreaker yesterday.
Oh, my goodness.
Look, in Pictou County, we're all so proud of Blair Turnbull
Right.
and Corey Chevry,
Right.
but all the team from Nova Scotia. But we got a couple folks on the men's team going to bring home the gold, we hope. But just so proud of the women's team. So excited for the men's team. What a cool time to be from Nova Scotia, watching the pride of our hometowns do justice to our communities on the world stage.
Sean,
Go Canada, go.
Go Canada, go, Sean. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks a lot.
That is the Attorney General for Canada, Minister Sean Fraser. We're going to take a break. I just saw a flash come across the television, folks, and I might get into trouble for this, but whatever. It looks like Sidney Crosby is not going to play today. So we will be Sidney Crosby less as we battle the Finns for a chance to advance to the gold medal game. So I promised you I'd let you know, and there you go. We're going to take a break. Blake's going to update us on what's going on in the news, and when we come back, we're going to continue our focus on Ottawa with our weekly conversation with our good friend Tim Powers. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We are back in minutes. Welcome back to the fabulous Friday edition of the program. Please welcome back to the show from Summa Strategies and Abacus Data. That's Tim Powers. Tim, how are you?
Well, we can hear each other today, Dan. I've self-service in the city of Ottawa. Thanks be to God, at least for me. I don't know about your listeners, but there you go.
Fair enough. Did you watch the hockey game yesterday?
Yeah, you know the answer to that, man, and then it was just heartbreaking. But you know what? After they got swamped 5-0 in the prelims, to come back and almost win it in overtime, and what a class act Philippe Poulin is, when she went around and hugged all of her teammates afterwards. So well done by them. The Americans have dominated for the last couple of years. Would have been hard to beat them, but our girls gave them a game.
They certainly did, and a big game later on this morning here in
Is
Atlantic
there
Canada.
Really? Yeah.
Heard some Nova Scotia guys are get together, play some shinny.
Well, let's hope one of them. I don't know. Is one of them going to make it? I don't think
doesn't
so.
Look like,
unfortunately,
it doesn't look like Sydney's going to be in the lineup, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, he's hopefully, if there's another game, he'll get a shot. But one game at a time. Tourneys are crazy things, as we've witnessed.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. Tim, the politicos are all in arms today after a televised announcement in Alberta last night from Danielle Smith, who says that people in her province are going to go to the referendum box in the fall and vote on 9 different questions. Your overarching thoughts on that?
I guess she has a right to do it. I think that's a weak form of governing. She argues, as I've heard her argue, that this is I trust in this, and I think people should be comfortable with this sort of governing. But you're having a referendum on immigration. I mean, you're playing to a crowd here, a broader Canadian sentiment driven by all sorts of things, and most of it not positive. I just don't think it's wise. I think people elect you to be a leader, don't de facto do referendums, and I think that's my big worry with all of that.
And some of it is, I think, just is red meat to her base.
Absolutely.
Like when you talk, do you think that we should abolish the Senate? Even if they vote 100% in favor, you have to have all of the provinces aligned in that for that to happen. And what's the chances of that happening?
Yeah, not much, right? I don't know. I think it's weak governance, but I guess the people of Alberta will get to decide themselves.
Another floor crosser this week, Tim. Your thoughts on Mr. Genroux?
Well, I guess he was as impressed as the rest of us were with the Davos speech, because that's what he said motivated his change. I'm not as fussed about Mr. Genroux. His constituency will ultimately decide if they like what he did or didn't do. I think the bigger concern has got to be for Pierre Poilievre, as clearly, another floor crosser. Mr. Genroux probably should have, in fairness to everybody, done this earlier, but he didn't. Anyway, it just brings more questions to Mr. Poilievre about his leadership, and it's just a vicious cycle for him. And that's something I'm sure he would prefer not to have to deal with. But it's the reality of his existence right now. And Mark Carney's coming up roses as I look at one on the screen. Don't worry, Dan, I wasn't going to send you any. I was just looking at some roses on the screen. But
never send me flowers anymore. Isn't that a song?
You don't either. So it's okay. We'll get past it.
All right, Tim. So is this it? Are there more? What's the spec in Ottawa?
Well, what have we seen, right? What happens is there's a lot of noise, and then all of a sudden it goes quiet, and then it happens. The chatter around here, I guess it's been right, Dan, I keep telling you it, and it does happen, is that there will be some more. You heard Lisa Wright, Nova Scotia girl, come out and say, what, we need, if you're going to go, just go. I don't know if that will be the case, but yeah, I think we'll probably see some more.
Does this end the speculation that your colleagues lit up in January about an early, perhaps spring election?
Why do you need a spring election if you have the majority, right?
Right.
So if he has a majority, he doesn't need a spring election. I mean, he still has to go to by-elections. There's at least 3 that he's got to have in the next 6 months, right. And if he gets those, look, if he gets a majority now, he doesn't need to go for one, and that looks a little bit more opportunistic. So, yeah, I think if there's more floor crossers, I doubt there'll be a spring election.
How does Pierre Poilievre handle all of this? Obviously, he's survived his leadership review, some raising question marks about how legit that was, but he's survived the leadership review, and now he's continuing to see people hemorrhaging from his caucus.
He has, and now he's got to watch his back more than he ever has, right? The last 2 leaders were undone by their caucuses, so it's you better buy some Kevlar. I know we're spending more on defense industries. Well, he might want to make a personal investment in all of this, right? Because it's going to get a little tougher for him. As much as people are spinning, you know what, this will probably work out better in the end because it'll give Pierre some more time and people will understand him. his own people in his caucus and people on the outside are going to say, okay, but why is everybody who serves with him leaving? They can't all just be opportunists. And if they are and they don't see an opportunity there, what does that mean for Mr. Poilievre? So, it creates more challenge for him, and it just doesn't allow him ever to get on a foot where the focus of his leadership critique is not himself, but Mark Carney. And that is something he's going to want to change, but I don't think it's going to be easily done.
Tim, is it easier for Conservatives to hold their nose and cross over and change their tie from blue to red because of Mark Carney and the fact that, I've had prominent Liberals tell me that Mark Carney's almost progressive Conservative in stature? Oh, yeah, entirely he is, right? And I think, there's a lot of people, it's the older voters, right? Usually older voters tend to be more aligned with Conservatives. Right now, they're very aligned with Mark Carney. And I don't think they're moving because they're also looking at Pierre Poilievre and saying, okay, we hear you on affordability, and that's an important issue, but it doesn't really affect us as much as it does younger people. And while we care about younger people, we care about ourselves. We want to see how you'd be as a prime minister. And I think that's, it's not obvious how he would be as a prime minister. So they're wanting to see more of that. So it's tough for him. Tim, as always, a pleasure, my friend. All right, go Nova Scotia. Let's hope if there is a gold medal game, we get Sid back, buddy. All right, Tim, I appreciate it. Talk to you next week. Take care. That is Bye. Tim Powers from Summa Strategies, Abacus Data, here as we roll along on our Friday edition of the program. A new program in its infancy is finding dozens of cancer cases in just a couple of years. A conversation with the medical director of Nova Scotia Health's lung screening program, Dr. Daria Manos. When we come back, you are listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ostrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. The fabulous Friday edition of the program. Glad you are able to spend some time with us. Don't forget, after 11 o'clock today, we're going to open up our telephone lines for the Friday free-for-all. This is your chance to wrap up the week and get whatever is on your mind off your chest. And that is what we look forward to on Fridays, and that's going to happen in about 15 minutes' time. So please be by the phone and get in early so you can avoid disappointment. This from the CBC's website. Nova Scotia's lung screening program still in its infancy, but those leading the effort say they've been able to deliver life-changing, positive news to dozens of people who might have received a terminal diagnosis in other circumstances. Lung cancer is often called the silent killer, as it doesn't become symptomatic until it advances to a late stage of the disease. About 80% of people die within 5 years of late-stage diagnosis, and Nova Scotia's new screening program is aiming to curb that. I'm very pleased to welcome to the show today to tell us a little bit more about this medical director of Nova Scotia Health's lung screening program, and that is Dr. Daria Manos. Dr. Manos, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. I'm great. Thanks for having me online.
This is quite an exciting development, I think, in early diagnosis for this terrible disease.
It is an exciting development. It's been several years in the making. A lot of people have come together. We've had a lot of patient advocates, family members come together, a lot of people working on this at Nova Scotia Health from the side of their desks. And it's a really rewarding program to be involved in, especially when you meet a few people whose lives have been changed because of the program.
Tell me a little bit about how it works and why we haven't done this in the past, I guess.
Yeah, well, it takes a long time to get something like this organized. The research, the science has been there for about 15 to 20 years, and then it takes a bit of time to figure out how we're going to put this into place. It isn't available all across Canada. Nova Scotia is one of the early provinces to implement what we know works from the science. And the way people can access the program, there's two parts, really. So the first step is you have to be between the ages of 50 and 74 with a history of smoking daily for at least 20 years. You can be an ex-smoker or a current smoker. That part doesn't matter. And then once you email us with that information at lungscreening@nshealth.ca, the next step is involve three parts. The first is information about improving your lung health, and then supports if you're still smoking and you're interested in quitting. And then the third part is we go through an individual risk assessment with every person. A nurse does that on the phone, and we figure out what your individual risk of having lung cancer is in the next 6 years. And if you're at very high risk, we talk to you about whether or not you'd want a screening CAT scan. And that's where we find the little tiny tumors, hopefully they're tiny when we find them, and get that person taken care of before that cancer progresses.
Obviously, this type of cancer, like many types of cancer, the success rate on recovering from it is better the earlier that you catch it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you said just in the little intro there, you said 80% of people die within 5 years. That is improving a little bit. But when you catch a cancer early, so cancers are staged 1 to 4, and when you catch a cancer at stage 1, which is the best time to catch a cancer, the 5-year survival is the opposite. So 20% of people die and 80% of people are alive 5 years later. And basically, when we find a lung cancer early, we treat it and we cure it. They're gone. We get rid of every cancer cell, and it's gone. So that's really rewarding. Now, sometimes when we screen people, we find an asymptomatic cancer that's not early stage, but most of the time, and we found that in Nova Scotia, 70% of the cancers we find with the screening program are stage 1 or 2.
Right. So it gives you a chance to get a handle on them.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the problems with lung cancer is, as you said earlier, it's a silent killer. It can grow quite big within the lungs without there being symptoms. And we also know, because of the shame surrounding lung cancer, unfortunately, and the shame surrounding smoking, is that we know that some people will ignore their symptoms as well. You know, that cough that's changing in nature, or that new cough that's hung around for a few months, or coughing up blood. These are the symptoms we want to get people checked out on earlier. Of course, if you have symptoms, screening's not right for you. You should see a primary care provider right away and get diagnostic imaging. But if you don't have symptoms, the screening program is the way to go.
Dr. Manos, this program is focusing on smokers, obviously the highest risk of developing lung cancer, but I can imagine that lung cancer can develop in non-smokers as well. Is there plans to expand this in the future?
Yeah, great question. Lung cancer is not actually super uncommon in non-smokers. It's much more common in smokers. And the good news is less people are smoking. We're down to around 13% of people, as opposed to in the 60s and 70s when it was much closer to 50%. So lung cancer is coming down in smokers, but it does occur in non-smokers as well. The problem is we have to balance the risks and harms of any medical procedure. And a screening CAT scan sounds like it should be, no harm at all. But actually, when you look at big numbers of people that go through a screening program, there are a lot of harms of screening. So we're always balancing those two things out. It looks right now that the risks involved with being involved in a screening program are worth it, quote unquote, for people that are at high risk of cancer. And people that aren't at high risk of cancer, we can actually do more harm than good if we screen them. But you're right, lung cancer, we are seeing lung cancer in non-smokers, and there's other things people can do to reduce their risk, but right now screening is not the way to go. I would love to be able to screen more people. I'd love to find a safe test that works. There's some great research being done with blood tests and breathing tests, and we're looking at ways to identify and quantify people's risk of lung cancer, even if they're a non-smoker. Things like how much radon you've been exposed to, for example.
Yeah, and we've discussed radon here, and it's prevalent in our part of the world because of our geology, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people don't know how much radon they're exposed to, and they're not monitoring it. And there's lots of great, I don't know them off the top of my head, but I think the Lung Association can help people out. You can get your radon measured in your basement is the best way to do it, and see if your house is one of the houses that has higher levels of exposure. And interestingly, in Nova Scotia, you can have two places right next door to each other, and one has high radon and the other doesn't. So it's a good idea to measure your individual house and not just rely on your neighbors.
Again, if somebody is in the category that you're looking for, Dr. Manos, how do they take part?
Great. They can do one of two things. One of three things. really, they can email us at lungscreening@nshealth.ca. That's the easiest way to do it. They can call us at 1-833-505-LUNG, which is 5864. If you call us, that takes a little bit longer. And then the third way is you can ask your primary care provider, your family doctor, or your nurse practitioner to make a referral to the program. So any of those three ways works for us.
Dr. Manos, appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much for your interest, and have a great day, and let's cheer on those hockey players.
You betcha.
Okay.
We're
Take
all
care.
over that. Thanks, Doctor. That is
Okay,
Dr.
care.
Daria Manos, who has joined the program today. She is the medical director of Nova Scotia Health's lung screening program, and they're finding cancer earlier, and that's always a good thing. And I encourage you to, if you fit those categories, you were a smoker for a long time or still are, I encourage you to take part in the program, because as much as maybe there is still stigma attached to that, getting these things diagnosed early is key when it comes to all forms of cancer, not just lung cancer, which of course we know is a silent killer here in the province and across the country and around the world. Time for us almost to take a break here on the show. We're going to open up the telephone lines for the Friday Free-for-All right after the news at 11. Blake's going to get us the update on that. It's your chance to talk about whatever it is on your mind. It's often imitated, never duplicated, I like to say, and there's plenty of stuff that we've talked about this week that is certainly open for discussion. There's maybe things out there that we haven't discussed this week that you want to bring to the attention of our crew. That certainly is as part of the cards as well. Regular rules apply, folks. Open hour rules. You can talk about just about anything that you want to talk about here on the program, and I look forward to that conversation. During our brief chat today, earlier in the show with Tim Powers, I called into question Pierre Poilievre and his leadership and the leadership review that was undertaken earlier this year, and some of you are not happy with the way that I framed that. What I was getting at, and just to sort of clarify, is that Pierre Poilievre won the leadership review with 84%, 82% voter support. But what I call into question on this whole thing is that I wonder what the grassroots think of Mr. Poilievre. Right? There was 2,500 delegates at that convention. So if you do the math, there's just over 2,000 people that supported Pierre Poilievre and his leadership of the Conservative Party. I think the last number I saw, 650,000 card-carrying Conservatives. There's probably much more, but that's the last number that I've seen. And that's just a very, very minute sample of the grassroots. And I wonder if this leadership question was opened up to the grassroots, to all the party members, if the vote would have been the same. That's all I was getting at. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the number. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The Friday Free-for-All after the update. Welcome back as we roll along here on a Friday edition of the program. This is the Friday Free-for-All, your chance to talk about whatever it is on your mind. Interesting discussions earlier this week on things like floor crossings and of course, yesterday, the announcement of a referendum in Alberta, not on separation, but on a number of different things. Of course, there was the heartbreaking loss on the Olympic ice yesterday for Canada's women's hockey team. I think a 3-on-3 overtime is just an awful way to lose a tournament. Why not 5-on-5? Just why not? Might be something you want to talk about. Also, we talked earlier in the week about the Premier being very quiet with regards to forcing people back to work, right? We had that conversation on Tuesday and Wednesday that those that have been working from home were being ordered back to work. And I raised a question that Premier Houston, who's normally very in front of these things, was being very quiet. And I'm not sure if the news that dropped off yesterday was part and parcel to that. But, of course, we learned yesterday that layoff notices handed out to dozens of Nova Scotia government employees. According to CTV News, 70 jobs were cut from the public service yesterday, most of them in the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. 3 museums, Prescott House, Fisherman's Life Museum, Sutherland Steam Mill, will be closing, and will visitor information centers in Yarmouth, where the ferry is, Port Hastings, Halifax Airport, and probably, if not leaps and bounds above everybody else, Nova Scotia's biggest tourism destination. That's Peggy's Cove. This all part of the budget, which will be tabled on Monday. That might be something you want to talk about as well. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We begin with Tony. Tony, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Dan?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
I'd like to bring up something from my MP for Halifax West is Lena Metledge-Diab. She's also the Minister for Immigration.
Correct.
She made an announcement a couple of days ago that they're going to open up the Canadian Armed Forces for recruitment purposes for foreign nationals, and then they'll be fast-tracked for citizenship. My question, I guess, to you and some of your listeners would be, are you happy with maybe somebody who served in the Russian army who fought in the Ukraine coming here and join the Canadian Forces, or perhaps a Chinese soldier, or how about Taliban soldiers that killed Canadian Forces members during the Afghan war? And put it in context, I'm a 44-year veteran, and I don't think that should be happening. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, of course, it would raise a question in my mind as well, Tony. I would hope, but if we lend a lot of credence to governments, maybe not a good idea. But I would hope that they would screen against potential combatants taking part in this program. It's not unique to Canada. I know the Americans even do this, where they'll bring people in from other countries that are not permanent residents and have them join the military. So I agree. I understand your concern. I really do. I would hope they would screen them out, but it's not unique to Canada, this program.
Well, absolutely. I'm a Canadian citizen. I joined the British Army at 16 and did 6 years with them, and then came back here and joined the Canadian Forces. So right. I know what happens. I actually considered joining the American Forces in the 70s as well because the Canadian Forces weren't doing anything. But I just sometimes wonder when politicians sit down and these think groups say, well, how can we bolster? Because the issue is that we can't get young people to join the Canadian Armed Forces for a number of reasons that we won't even get into now. But I just think these Band-Aid solutions where they say, well, let's just open this up and we'll bring in foreigners. And I think it needs to be looked into a lot more in detail and the repercussions of doing that. But I don't know if there's any other veterans out there or people have opinion on that, but I'd be interested to hear it. So thank you for listening to me.
Appreciate it, Tony. Have a great weekend.
You too.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. This from Global News. Canada launching a new express entry immigration stream for permanent residents to meet the future needs of the economy, including categories for research, transportation, military recruitment. According to Immigration Minister Lena Diab, these will be in addition to specialized streams already in place for healthcare and social service workers like nurse practitioners, dentists, pharmacists, psychologists, chiropractors, and for trades like carpenters, plumbers, and machinists. That announcement was made earlier this week. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Tim.
Or Dan, how are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, one thing in particular, in regards to next week's with the House returning, I hope Mr. Houston will sit longer than a few days to discuss the budget, because with $1 billion plus ever-growing budget, laying off a few people. There has to be a better plan than that to reduce Nova Scotia from this exorbitant budget.
Right, I hear you.
Or a deficit.
I get it. Yeah, it's we've been talking about this forever, that he needs to do something, and this appears to be one of his plans to attack it. But I think it's 80 jobs. I mean, it's awful for the people that are losing their jobs. Don't get me wrong, but that doesn't even make a dent in the deficit.
Well, it doesn't. But I haven't heard any of him or his ministers or the government for all have a plan, and that's what scares me, because as that interest continues to grow, it's $1 billion, it's $1 billion plus.
Yep.
At some point, when do we wake up and say enough's enough? You have to be responsible. You have to be accountable, and if you're in a position to make decisions, you have to stand by that. So at some point, yes, you can have all the window dressing you want, but that debt continues to grow, and somebody's going to have to pay for it, and it's all of us collectively.
You got it. Absolutely.
We'll see what he does next week.
You betcha, Tim. I appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. This is these tough decisions, obviously, and people end up on both sides of them, right? When you start talking about laying people off, that's people's livelihoods, right? That's people that have had good paying jobs, and I know that some will say, most will say that the civil service is too big, that the government is bloated, and that we need to make cuts. And I don't think I just said, well, I know I don't disagree with you on that one. But that being said, there are still 80 people and 80 families that are going to be impacted by these cuts, right? So I wonder if museums were the kind of the low hanging fruit. I'm concerned more about the tourism industry. When the premier was in here a couple weeks ago, he was trumpeting how important tourism is to our part of the world, yet the tourism department is the first department that we see that falls to the Budget Act. So interesting days ahead, I think, and that budget is coming down on Monday, and we were going to do our very best to try and get somebody, maybe Minister Lohr, maybe the Premier himself, on to answer some questions after the budget document is released. Let's grab one more before the break. Carlos, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm well. What's on your mind today?
Yes, well, like yesterday, I call and we talk about floor crossing, and yes, and I said that people should make this a political issue, right? That they should call the MP or MLA about it. I slept on this issue a little bit, and actually I have an extra thought on it. I think yesterday we agreed that it can create a widespread disenchantment. People saying, why should I bother to vote if this politician changed political party like they changed underwear or something, right? So the problem is what comes afterwards, because this widespread disenchantment is the perfect setting for an outsider, a Trump-like candidate, a populist leader to come and say, vote for me, and I will change this upside down. I'll make it illegal, prohibit, find a way to stop that from happening. If the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, give a statement tomorrow saying, you know what, vote for the Conservative Party, and no matter if I am the leader or not, we will make floor crossing impossible. That I think you would see a lot of people supporting because of that. And the party is neck to neck with the Liberal. Clearly, it's a leader problem here. But if they go after this issue as a party issue that they will implement, no matter who is the leader, I think they would find their numbers picking up. But anyway, that's the key issue here that I thought. This problem affects the belief spine of the political system. People more and more, why should I bother to vote? And this is the perfect setting for a populist leader to come in. I'm not a politician. Vote for me. I'll make this impossible. I think a lot of people would follow them, and that is a major problem. That's a major challenge. Anyway, and that's it, my friend.
Have a good weekend, Carlos.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. This just in, folks, and thanks to you all that have been emailing me. I'm reading this off the CBC National site, and it has to do with Donald Trump. In a decision delivered today, U.S. Supreme Court justices have said that President Donald Trump overstepped his authority when he used emergency powers to impose tariffs on nearly every one of the country's trading partners last year. Do you remember Liberation Day? The decision invalidates the legal basis Trump has used to impose sweeping tariffs for the better part of a year, which means the U.S. Treasury might be forced to refund importers billions of dollars in earnings. The ruling also means the president must abandon the central tool he's used to pursue his economic and foreign policy strategy since returning to office for his second term. This just fresh off the press, folks. We'll dig into it. It's a huge document, apparently, and we'll bring you the very latest. But the top line is that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump overstepped his authority when he used emergency powers to impose all those tariffs on nearly all the countries in the world during Liberation Day last year. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. As we watch the ongoing Olympic Games, and Canada is in tough, I'll tell you that much. If you're recording it, I don't want to spoil it for you. Canada is in tough right now. They're late in the game, and they're down to Sweden. Team Canada, the hockey team, is getting ready to take on Finland. It's a busy, busy day, and the U.S. Supreme Court making that decision just moments ago that essentially told the President of the United States that he overstepped and couldn't use the rules that he used to put all those tariffs on people. So it's going to be a busy day, and we're very glad that you're able to spend some time with us. Let's go right back to the phones, and we welcome David to the show. David, how are you?
Good, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind today?
I don't know if you missed it or not, or I missed it, but did you know that Mayor Fillmore paid a consultant $13,000 to write a speech?
I did not. I didn't see that part. I did see that his budget, he's asked for a increase in his office budget.
This is getting out of hand. I said this before. I'll just read you the clip here.
Sure.
One piece of news dropped off council yesterday that caught my eye. This is a news feeding local here on the internet. I happen to be in meetings all day, so missed council. But allegedly, Mayor Andy Fillmore paid a consultant $13,000 to write a speech, despite having trained staff who write and could write the speech for him. That is mind-boggling. And then it goes on to say, the reporter goes on to say, that's half of what minimum wage workers make here in Nova Scotia. More than your deposit would be, or your down payment would be for a house. So that man, if this is true, has spent $13,000 of taxpayers' money for private consultant, to make him a speech.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to dig into it, and I appreciate it, David. But I did see that his ask for the budget was an increase well over what the previous mayor had, and it's interesting that he's looking for an increase to his budget when he's looking at slashing everything else.
Yeah, this is an online reporter that posted this, and I just came across it this morning having my coffee, and I almost spit out my coffee going, what? This man who gets on here and talks about how he wants to cut this and that and spends this money. So it'd be great to find out if it's true.
Fair enough.
And, and another point before I go is, I'm not a big fan of how political is ran around here in Nova Scotia, and what party's in here. I know what party I vote for, hope for the best, but I will say maybe HRM should take notes from the provincial. Maybe they should take notes from the premier, how he's cutting jobs, cutting departments, so on and so forth. And maybe it's time that HRM, Dan, and I've said this before, start cutting their own department. Start looking into the offices and laying off people and taking the roles of people and putting it together instead of having four, take it down to one. Nothing's being done with that, Dan. I've brought it up before. The councils don't want to bring it up. Like they talk about, it's unionized and this and that. You need to take the knife out and make cuts here. And seeing HRM associate on there for a snowstorm saying our plows are going to be out, so on and so forth. Do we really need that person? I've mentioned that before. Do we need these roles? And I think for us taxpayers that have to look at cuts, they're talking about cuts to taking the ferry down and cuts to bus routes. Why don't you cut in your own damn office? Why don't you look at the staff that you have hired, and why don't you start laying people off, just like the government has done here? Is it right or wrong? We can have that debate and argue back and forth. But I think it's time HRM starts looking deep in their own office and who's sitting at a desk and getting a darn salary here, who isn't needed. Maybe we don't need 3 people doing the same job. Maybe we need 1. And they're not even willing to look at that. And then I come across this $13,000 speech. This is what I'm talking about. This is what this council is a mess about. This is what us taxpayers are paying for. Misguided, misled. It's ferocious. I went to my first council and sat in the seats there. Like one of your callers said, well, maybe you should go watch. I did that. What a circus. What a circus. And what a clique. And there's a little group in there that I see that is trying to run the whole show, and everybody else is a puppet.
Have a good weekend, David.
You too. Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't have the numbers for the speech, and of course we'll take David at his word, but that he's got it. But I don't see it. I do see a Chronicle Herald article that says that the mayor is looking at an increase of 16% to his office budget. He's spending currently 29% more than Mike Savage did. Obviously, that one's a bit of a tough comparison given the economic conditions, but he is looking at a 6-person staff that will grow to 7 in the mayor's office. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. That is the number. How many studies did HRM Council pay independent companies to provide stats to support their bike lane madness? Writes Ken. We've talked about this before, right? We know that we get staff reports. We know that staff are employed to do these reports. But council, in some cases, will go to independent and outside sources for information. And I don't know if they keep the stat. But I would like to know how much it costs to get a staff report done. I get it that each of them are different and each have a different scope and a length of time. But when we're taking a city staffer off of the job that they're supposed to do to go out and do what is this, the third one now that we're doing on bike lanes, or in the budget realm? Sean Cleary this week, or on Friday last week, asking for staff to go back again and look at the budget and come back with a 0% increase in what we would need to cut to do that. This all takes time and it all costs money, folks. It's very interesting to watch this budget debate. I will agree with David that it can be comical at times to watch some of the debate and some of the interactions that happen, and the budget process is just so long, right? Many jurisdictions across the country have already done their budgets. Something you might want to talk about. We're going to keep the telephone lines open until the top of the hour. This is the Friday Free for All. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We are back after the update. All right, so I was reading in that article earlier in the program today in the Chronicle Herald about the increase to the mayor's budget, and further down the article that I had a chance to get all the way through it as we were in the break, it actually does lay out what one of our callers was talking about with that $13,000 expense for a speech. It reads, councillors scrutinized, this is in the Chronicle Herald, by the way, scrutinized what the mayor's staff does and also charge over $90,000 from Fillmore's first year in office. When an outside recruitment firm was hired to restructure and hire for his office, they asked McRae, who was Joanna McRae, who was a former staffer, why in-house human resources couldn't have done it. McRae said it was done in conjunction with internal HR. It was the first mayoral transition since 2012. She pointed to the ongoing search for a chief administrative officer, which is also using an external firm. And then Jerry Blackwood, who's HRM's chief financial officer, clarified that the firm was hired through an alternative proposal, not through competitive procurement. The outside firm was also paid $13,000 to write the mayor's State of the Municipality speech. McRae repeated several times yesterday that even in this year, with this year's growth, the mayor's office still represents 0.1% of the total municipal operating budget, and that its share has remained consistent over the last decade. So just wanted to get all that out there. The city council debate over the mayor's office said yesterday that he did, in fact, bring in an outside firm to write his state of the city address, I believe it was, at $13,000. So there you go. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Peter.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Our government, for God's sakes, I was just looking at the stats. It's really funny. Nova Scotia always comes in last as far as child poverty and, pretty well everything, prices, inflation, house prices. The list is basically endless. Do you know that we have the largest percentage of civil and public employees in Canada? 30%.
Nova Scotia or Atlantic Canada?
Nova Scotia.
Really? Because I know there was a lot of debate about federal employees in PEI over the years.
And also, may I?
Sure.
Also, the biggest thing is the amount of money we spend on government contractors has raised 27% just this year.
Right.
So, and Alberta, on the other hand, which everyone touts as the richest province, which has the very best pay for their employees, and who has, far less poverty than we do. That's obvious. They have the lowest amount of public employees. So what we have here, because if you have to look at it, there are producers and there are parasites, right? So if you're a producer, like I was, you work for a private outfit, you produce something, in my case, logs, and that adds to the GDP, making your country wealthier. Well, if you have 30% of people who don't pay taxes, who actually take taxes.
What do you mean they don't pay taxes? I don't understand your point.
Well, if your paycheck originates from the taxpayer,
right?
Well, then you take taxes.
But you give some back, right?
Okay, but what you don't give back, you take, right?
I think I get where you're going with it, Peter.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's.
Then,
do all your logs go to private companies, or do they go to government contracts?
Well, if it goes to a government contract,
where did the logs go? Was it for paper or for lumber?
Both.
See, so that lumber could have went to a government contract. So through your theory, you could have been taking tax money too.
It gets sold to newspapers. It gets sold to magazines.
Right.
It gets. But anyways, that's you're.
So the military are double dipping. Is what you're saying.
But anyways, you're straying off the general kind of gist of things.
Okay, I'm sorry if I am. I apologize.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you can't produce something that you can exchange for goods, then you're a parasite. If you create something that produces wealth, like cutting down a tree and making something out of it,
mm-hmm.
or fixing the machine that does the tree thing, or all the rest of that stuff that the private sector should be doing, like drilling for oil and boiling sand for oil and building pipelines. That's private sector. That's where the wealth comes from. The rest of them, in Halifax, 30% plus whatever contractors, they don't produce anything. They just sit there at the end of it all and take it. Take what we've produced. And we don't get their pensions. We don't get their guaranteed incomes. We don't get their guaranteed job security. We don't get anything. So this country has a big problem.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I get his thought process, and I really do, Peter. I understand where you're coming from, that all workers need to create goods so that we grow our GDP, is what you're saying. But we all know that there isn't a jurisdiction anywhere on the planet that happens in. There's always going to be people that aren't working in the raw resource or in the manufacturing or the construction industry, right? There's always going to be people that have office jobs. Bankers are parasites, according to what he does, right? If we don't have the bank, you can't buy the machine to knock the logs down or to saw them up or put them through the paper mill. And I take exception to saying that or to the analogy of a parasite for anybody that works in the government. It's easy to attack the civil service, right? But you got to be careful when you talk about government workers and people who are paid through taxpayers' money. I'd ask you to go down to the dockyard and next time you are there and talk to a sailor and say, hey, you're a parasite. They get paid through taxpayers' money. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. Our last conversation with Peter reminded me of the days of yore when I was in the military, and it was the eternal debate, right? As you well know, I was in the land element, the Army, and the infantry thought that the Army existed purely for them, that the frontline guys on the march were the reason why the military existed, and those of us that worked in the support trades were there purely just to support them. And by definition, you can see the correlation. However, those people in the support trades have a job to do, and the frontline troops can't function without that job, right? It's a symbiotic relationship as opposed to a parasitic relationship, if that makes any sense. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-825. I want to get to back to your calls in a minute, but a story has just come across. It's on the CBC's website about some more changes that the Houston government is going to get ready to release here when they release their budget on Monday. And this one is involving the Natural Resources Department. According to the article on the CBC, internal memos describing this as a step to align the government's priority of finding new ways to boost revenue. One of the people affected says the changes will be completely devastating to conservation in the completely devastating to conservation in the province. The email says those changes include the Wildlife Division being renamed and integrated into resources planning, which will be grouped with integrated resource management, land administration, and surveys and research, and a new land strategy and planning branch. Forest Health Division is being moved into the forestry branch of the department, and a new advisory function is being created with the Associate Deputy Minister's Office to advance strategic priorities. That on the CBC. Halifax Examiner also has a story on this as well. So the details of what is coming in the budget are certainly starting to filter out here on a Friday. Interesting times. Back to the phones. We say hello to Nelson. Nelson, how are you?
Well, good day, Dan. Good day. I'd just like to touch on the immigration situation here.
Sure.
Unfortunately, you talked about the immigration minister saying they're going to bring in people for the truck driving. CBC did a story. It was on a show called Stories from Here. When
did I say truck drivers? I don't think I said that today, did I?
Oh, transportation.
Okay. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. And anyway, the multinationals lobbied the government to bring in people from India to come here to be trained, which they would pay for, to drive the trucks for their companies. Now, most of these companies aren't Canadians. And it's the same thing for the military. Now I heard them say they're going to bring in people to join the military. Unfortunately, what is happening here are we are being truly scammed by the multinationals here. The scam is, it's basic economics, supply and demand. If you have a low supply, then you got to pay more for your people.
Okay.
But if you bring in more and absolutely overflow, then your wages go down. The scam by the multinationals is to drive the wages of the Canadians down. There are lots of truck drivers, but unfortunately, they don't pay enough for them to make a living.
Are there a lot of truck drivers, Nelson? The reason I ask that question is I read stories almost every week about a shortage of truck drivers, not only here, but everywhere.
And that is being put out by the multinationals. It is the same thing with the fast food industry. That is being put out by the multinationals, and our unfortunate news just repeats this continually without looking into it. It is not true. And the military is the same. We have military people now that unfortunately are fighting for housing, some of them are going to the food bank because they're not making enough money. But if you're going to bring in immigrants, once again, and I'll almost guarantee you they're going to be from India because that seems to be the preferred country that they bring them from, mainly because the average wage in India is $2,980 a year. That's the income. So they come here and they live in apartments, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments where they have 10 and 15, where Canadians just don't do that. They just won't do it.
15 people in a 2-bedroom apartment? Wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All around the city. All around the city. You can ask anybody that, and people who have looked into their doors, all they see is mattresses on the floor.
Okay.
Basically nothing else. And that's what's going on. And the whole idea by the multinationals is to drive down the wages of Canadians so they can make more profit. We're absolutely being scammed, and it has to be stopped. If you have to pay more money for the military so they can live a half-decent life, you'd have the people. If you paid more money for the trucking industry,
I
then
disagree
you
with
would
you,
have
Nelson.
the people.
The young people don't want to join the Army. They just do not, no matter what the wage is.
Well, that's good for you, Dan, but I totally disagree with you.
Okay.
I totally disagree. People see what is happening with people in the military. That's why they don't want to join. They can't get benefits.
What
some
benefits?
of them, for God's sakes, are forced on the street.
What
That
benefits
should
are you
not be
talking about?
happening to our military.
Hang on, Nelson. What benefits are you
hanging on.
talking about? What benefits does a member of the Canadian military not get now?
My God, you see how many are fighting for benefits that they put in this new program that basically.
Are you talking
block
about
them. They're going-
veterans?
You have an individual who calls your show quite often who tells you how much he
Nelson,
has to fight.
There's a difference between active and veterans, right? I get the veterans part. I agree with that. But to
And
become
there's
a veteran,
active
you got to
military
serve,
who
right?
are going to the food bank. I mean, that has been on the radio and on TV, that they're forced to the food bank. And some of them are looking at losing their homes because, unfortunately, they have one income a lot of the times because they move around so much, and they just can't afford the costs today. That's what's going on. And the scam is that these multinationals, most of them are not Canadians, do not care about Canadians. We are headed for a third world country. People have to see that. And the scam is in. If anybody is wondering why you see so many people from India in all these different establishments is because the multinationals, the McDonald's, your Wendy's, your Burger Kings, your Walmarts, they order directly from Ontario, their workers, most of them. And they're sent here. They're sent here from Ontario. That's why you see them absolutely everywhere. They are warehoused in Ontario, brought in, warehoused there, and they're ordered. They're ordered from McDonald's and Wendy's. That's who they deal with. That's
Nelson,
why the local people are not getting
real
hired.
serious allegations there, Nelson. I appreciate it, man. I'm going to move on to another call. Appreciate
okay,
it.
Dan,
Have a good
you
one.
keep protecting them, buddy. Welcome to the third world.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Warehoused. Like they're a commodity. Interesting, isn't it? People will tell me that work in those industries, maybe not the truck driving industry, I'll give you that one, Nelson, but in those food support industries, as you called them, that will tell you that they cannot and have tried forever to get people and have raised wages to get people to come in, and they will not do it. They will not do it. We have a guy that a contractor calls here all the time that can't keep people in his employ, paying higher wages than most. Why is that? Why is it that when I hear of restaurants on Agricola Street paying $20 and $21 and $22 and $23 an hour and they still can't keep people? Why is that? Is that the multinationals that are doing that? Hello, Byron.
Hello. I just heard you saying $20 an hour. That's not even that much money now. I made that 30 years ago.
Agreed.
And it wasn't that much money then.
Yep.
$20 an hour. And that guy that's saying that these people are 15 people in a one-bedroom apartment, it is true. I've seen it over and over. I move around Nova Scotia. I just moved to the bottom of Alberta Lake Road from up the hill. And I had friends, and there was 15 of them in one apartment. And they go in through the window in the back.
Holy smokes.
It's a big problem. These are big problems. And this guy is right about the multinationals. They want Canadians to starve to death. We go to the States. They're living way better than we are. and people are saying we don't want to become a state. I kind of do, because this country
Really,
sucks.
Byron? Really?
This country is unreal. Nova Scotia, the Maritimes. I lived in Alberta. I come here. I don't even want to live here anymore. I can't afford to do anything.
So you'd rather be an
I
American
can tell
state?
my daughter, let's move to Alberta, and they're going to separate and be better again.
All right, man. I don't think I'm going to change your mind, but I appreciate your call.
I've been in 38 different states. I've been across Canada multiple dozens of times. I have brothers that were born in. I have 4 different brothers in each in a different province, and 2 other stepbrothers, half brothers. And like I'm almost a senior now, and I'm the same, ready to move to Alberta, so I'm going to live.
All right, Byron, appreciate it. Have a good weekend, sir.
Be treated better by people, employers, governments, and it seems like society here is degrading.
All right, Brian, appreciate it, man. I want to get to another call, but I think that to suggest that you'd rather be in the United States than in Canada, that's a big stretch. Enjoy your free health care, by the way. Hello, Catherine.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
I'm just happy to be here today.
Oh, so am I. What's on your mind?
Here to chat about Public Health's new infant feeding center. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Okay.
You're on the air. Let's go.
Great. That's great. Well, we're really excited to add an additional option for families to receive free and experienced infant feeding support from our public health nurses here in early years Central Zone. And we provide this care and support in many ways, whether that's in the individual's home or in a community setting.
Actually, Catherine, I'm going to stick you on hold because you're our next segment. I knew that name sounded familiar. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break, or we're going to put you on hold, and we're going to take the break for the news, and then we'll come back to that. My absolute apologies to you, Catherine. And the last word today goes to Hamid. Hamidi, how are you? Hello. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
There you are. Welcome.
Thank you. I find very interesting discussion the last 2 calls. I think the gentleman's name is Peter. He was talking about public servant are not paying tax, and they are.
Well, he didn't say that. He said that they are taking taxes and then paying taxes. So they're taking it both. You know, they're being paid by taxpayers' income, is what he said.
Yeah, they are definitely. So I'm not defending anyone here. It's just I find our society is either extreme left or extreme right. Basically, we always try to go to the extreme. So there is people working on the federal government, on the province, on the municipality level. There is good people and bad people, obviously. That's the reality of things. So there is federal infrastructure at the municipal level, at the federal level, at the province, that they need to be managed and maintained. So if we're going to go with that thought, basically, we don't need police. We don't need military. We just need private sector managing the country, which is not realistic. So I'm a big fan of government transformation. Basically, transforming the government at municipal level, at the federal level, or the province, it's a continuous work that need to be evaluated every year to find efficiency. But going to the extreme about, hey, those guys are I think he was the word parasite, basically. That's pretty much the extreme Trump era way of thinking that, hey, it's my way or the highway. And I think everybody needs to find the balance between helping the government to move forward and find efficiency and reduce the tax and improve the way of living everywhere, or just pretty much staying and being extremely critical and not finding solutions. So that's my first point. My second point about immigrant. I'm an immigrant. I am always big fan of qualified immigration. What's qualified immigration is basically balanced immigration. I think the last 2 years we know there is a problem. Obviously, there is massive wave of immigration in general in Canada, not just in Nova Scotia. That's what people don't realize. And maybe we can see it as a society. It's a shock. Yes, people they didn't get used to that. People feel threatened. I think the last 20 or 30 years, I immigrated to Canada in 2003. It was always a balanced immigration or qualified immigration. Basically, you bring people to Canada because we need we need labor. Pretty much, that's the reality of things. And we help those people to integrate in Canada, and they study, they graduate, they buy a house, they raise family, they get integrated to the society basically, and they pay tax like anyone else. So that model was working for Canada for the last 5 years. I know things changed the last 2 years. I do believe federal government and the province, they need to work together to go to the old way of have that qualified balance immigration without going to those extreme thoughts about, hey, Indian, I'm not Indian, but Indian are here to kill us, Indian are here to steal our food, or there is that big conspiracy that those big multi-international company, they are here just to steal our money. We are a capitalist country. We are not communist. Yes, you need multi-international company as part of the economy. That's the reality of our economy. But living on that conspiracy, I think that's not reasonable.
Hamidi, I'm out of time. I appreciate your calls. I appreciate everybody who picked up the phone and dialed the conversation. We're going to do it again on Monday. Make sure you're here at 11 o'clock. Time for us to take a break. The news is next. Back. It is hour number 3 of the Fabulous Friday edition, and you may have caught a preview of our next guest during the open hour. It gets busy in here, you know. Nova Scotia Health has launched a new infant feeding center in Central Zone. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show Katherine Malec, who's the early years manager with Central Zone Public Health. My apologies for the confusion, Katherine.
I'm still happy to be here, Dan.
I'm glad you're here. Tell me a little bit about this. What exactly is an infant feeding center?
Great. Well, this is another avenue of support that is embedded within our early years public health program. So our public health nurses offer free and experienced feeding support in a number of ways here in Central Zone, and that's by going into clients' homes, community locations. We have a large number of drop-ins in partnership with libraries and family resource centers where public health nurses can provide support for families with infant feeding there. And this is a new opportunity to offer the availability of booked appointments at a central location, which is the Mumford Professional Center, every Tuesday for infant feeding support.
So what does it look like when somebody comes into the center for the first time, Katherine? What can they expect?
What could they expect is meeting one-on-one with one of our public health nurses, and they will work with the family to understand what the challenges or questions they have, and from assessments and support at that point, develop an individual plan of care for the family and support them through those challenges, and also maintain that continuum of care as they move along in their journey.
Do you have a capacity? Is it a first come, first serve? How does it work?
Well, our infant feeding center itself is booked via appointment. So we have a number of appointments available every Tuesday, but we also have the ability, like as I said, for clients, people can self-refer into public health early years, and our public health nurses can support them, call, usually within a business day or two, and arrange to provide support in the home if that works better for clients.
So this is really an education component, right? This is to give perhaps new moms an opportunity to learn as they go?
Absolutely, and help support. Becoming a new parent is a big transition. So in that period of learning how to feed your baby as well, there's a learning curve that comes along with that as well. So it's providing that space and support.
Do you expect that it's going to be a popular service?
I would say so. We do expect that. We do know that many families have very common feeding challenges in the early days of learning to feed their infants. So I do expect that. I do know that the value of the service that we provide is there, and I expect that we'll be able to support lots of families through this.
Is this purely focusing on breastfeeding, or is this on all forms of feeding of infants?
On On all forms of feedings of infants. Our public health nurses are well skilled and trained in supporting for both breast and chest feeding, as well as formula feeding and supplementation and different routes such as that.
I imagine would be a valuable service.
I would like to think so. Yes.
Catherine, if somebody out there is listening to us today and is a new mom or wants to take part in this program, what's the best way they can do that?
The best way they can do that is to reach out to Public Health Early Years. What they could do is look up infant feeding support with Public Health, and it will take us right to the webpage where we have all of our contact information. And we are happy to support any families here in Central Zone with our service and care.
Are you looking for soon-to-be moms or new moms or both?
Excellent question. Everyone. Yes, we do support families in the prenatal period up to when a child is 5 years old. So anyone who could benefit from public health nurse support during that time, we encourage you to reach out.
Catherine, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
That is Katherine Malec. She is the early years manager for Central Zone Public Health, with a new infant feeding center being set up here. We're going to get ready to take our next break, and we're going to talk with the Executive Director of Energy Planning at the Government of Nova Scotia within the Department of Energy. We tried to get the Energy Minister, but apparently he's busy these days. So we'll have a conversation with David Miller when we come back. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We are back in minutes. All right, welcome back as we roll along here on a Friday afternoon. Many of you, I know, are watching the Team Canada hockey game, and, we're trying to do the same as we roll along here. I'm not going to spoil it for you with updates inter-period, but Canada's in tough. That's all I'll say about that. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Folks, I want you to remember that number because we're going to do the open hour again on Monday, and I hope we can pick up the conversation from where we left it here on the open hour. Part of the open hour earlier this week, we had discussion about a new report that's come out. There's been a lot of discussion as of late about the Premier's plan, the Wind West project, as it's called, which would involve us building wind turbines offshore in 4 areas. The Premier touting on its release that in the long term, this thing could generate somewhere between 40 to 66 gigawatts if everything goes according to plan. Now, a new report from Stantec that has just been released said that Nova Scotia could generate 9 gigawatts of power in its existing wind energy areas by 2050. And then the high end of all Atlantic Canada would be able to generate 16.5 gigawatts by 2050. As you can imagine, that's a lot lower than what the Premier had suggested that Wind West could do. I am very pleased to welcome to the show today the Executive Director of Energy Planning over there at the Government of Nova Scotia Department of Energy. It's David Miller. David, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
So there's a big difference between 40 to 60 gigawatts and 16, as the Stantec report indicates. Were the Premier numbers off?
I think we're really comparing 2 very different concepts and 2 different stories here. So the Stantec report was started with a scope of work that was designed a couple years ago, far in advance of the ideas of Wind West. And the scenarios that are modeled in that report that get Stantec to that number of 9 gigawatts and 16.5 gigawatts was based on a series of constraints that, the Wind West project does not envision as being challenges, or they're part of the project in that we need to build more transmission. The Stantec modeling didn't include as much of that as we see as necessary for Wind West, and had a couple other constraints that I think are different views, but there are different views in engineering and technology, and those evolve over time as the wind industry changes as well.
Some of those constraints, construction-related and environment, like ice?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and if you dig into the Stantec report, it says that, look, if you want to put wind turbines everywhere in Nova Scotia's offshore, you could hit 433 gigawatts. So far in excess of what we're talking about in Wind West and in far in excess of what would be available in those first wind energy areas. So the area is not the issue. Nova Scotia's offshore is very large, and there's lots of opportunity for offshore wind. What Stantec's model showed was that in this specific scenario, the binding constraint, as they would say, or what capped the amount of development was the demand for the power. And we believe that there are new demands for that power. And the model that Stantec used was focused on a very specific set of things, that there would be no new transmission to Quebec, for example, and that the New England market was only purchasing the energy where it was cheaper than the other energy options that they had. But we know today that demand in Quebec and New England, as well as across almost all of the world really, is growing for electricity. And that growth curve has really sharpened in the last 2 years, driven not just by AI and data center use, but just the overall electrification of economies, whether that's at the household level from people buying EVs or heat pumps, like we see a lot in Nova Scotia, or industries that are using electric motors instead of natural gas-powered equipment or other things that use electricity more. So that demand has sharply risen. And we also know that places like Quebec, New England, and here, we don't just buy electricity because it's the cheapest resource. We don't always choose it based on that alone. We look at other factors. So things like offshore wind and onshore wind are often priced in a way that they're stable for 25 or 30 or even 35 years in price. So you might choose that stability because you know that in the long run, that's going to get you the best deal. And you also want that guarantee of delivery rather than relying on a series of gas plants in New England to keep you going during those winter months. So we think that there's a unique opportunity that offshore wind provides to these markets, and that's why these markets have been choosing it. There's offshore wind being constructed in Northeast United States. There's offshore wind all throughout Europe and throughout Asia as well that's being developed because companies, provinces, states, and countries all want to see this really stable, large-scale resource to provide that for that electricity demand that they see growing every year on and on into the future.
David, you mentioned transmission, and infrastructure is obviously a big component of this with the grid in question. Would this new transmission that we would have to create to support Wind West, would this be a completely new grid? Would it be independent of Nova Scotia Power?
There's a lot of different options that we see, but in general, yes. The scale of offshore wind that we're talking about, 5 gigawatts, is more than twice what the Nova Scotia system uses on the coldest day in the winter. So it is far in excess of what our grid can carry. Our wires are literally not big enough to carry that much power. So we see this as dedicated transmission systems that use a different technology, a high voltage direct current, which is what is often used for big distances with large power plants, to get that power to market. So those transmission lines would likely be fully independent of our grid. There are opportunities for Nova Scotia to have a connection to that, so we could use some of the offshore wind locally in those periods where it's most helpful to our grid, in those cold days in winter perhaps. But in general, the bulk of the power that would be generated offshore would be for those other markets. And part of that reason is that we are building lots of resources to meet our own electricity demand already. So there's lots of onshore wind under construction. There's the new intertie with New Brunswick for transmission to help us share our existing resources better, and all these other investments that are getting us to that point in the Clean Power Plan where we can retire coal by 2030. And so this new offshore resource can really help those markets that are much larger than ours, whether that's Quebec that has, an annual generation that is, I think, almost 20 times ours, or New England, which is, even larger still as a whole for that electricity demand. And that's where offshore wind really has its value, is meeting the scale that those areas demand.
David, would it be wrong for me to say that most of the power, a very significant percentage of the power that we generate offshore once this, or if this project is built, will be shipped out of province and only be used in Nova Scotia in a quote unquote emergency situation?
In general, I'd say that's right. I wouldn't necessarily just say emergency, but in a cold day
or a high demand
we might
situation,
want to,
right?
Yeah, but yes, no, the vast majority would. And I want to be clear, though, that this does not change our trajectory in Nova Scotia toward reducing the use of fossil fuels on our grid. We have a clean power plan that's aiming to get us off coal by 2030, and we have more work to be done. But a lot of that work is using our existing onshore wind resources, better managing the demand through batteries, and then the transmission connection to New Brunswick. So there's a lot of other work happening. We are not ignoring the domestic side of this equation. We're just focused on the offshore wind as an export resource because it's so much larger than we could manage on our grid alone.
Wouldn't it make sense to take advantage of the power that we're generating and use it here in Nova Scotia? Obviously, we're going to generate much more than we need.
So part of it is that when it's generated, electricity is pretty difficult to store. Even the large-scale batteries we have are only 4 hours duration. So we need to make sure that we have resources available at all hours of the day, all hours of the year. And so we're developing primarily the onshore wind resource as the absolute lowest cost energy source that we have. So we're going to maximize that as much as we can. And then we'll fill in whatever gaps remain with whatever resource is cost effective. And if in the future that is offshore wind, then we will certainly work with the IESO here, that is the plan of the electricity system, and with Nova Scotia Power and the transmission to ensure that Nova Scotia uses that when it's cost effective. But that's probably the important part is there's no use in building offshore wind when we can build onshore wind. So we're focused on what makes sense for our grid, for our own domestic use, and we're focused on offshore to meet the large-scale demand as opposed to the relatively smaller demand of Nova Scotia or even the Atlantic provinces as a whole.
David, the Premier has put some pretty tight timelines on this project. The first one, 2030, that's by my clock 6 years or 4 years away. Can we get this thing built in 4 years?
So there are a series of steps in this process, and our target is to have electricity generation from our offshore as soon as we can. And that's the timeline we're working toward is as soon as we can in almost all scenarios here. Getting it done by 2030 is going to be a challenge we probably can't meet. But I think that we are more looking at what can we do to serve these markets that demanded in early 2030s, whether that's 2032 or 2033, with the time required to do all the environmental studies, to do all the design work, and getting the equipment. This is a very substantial investment. Our early stage estimates are this is probably on the order of $60 billion. So it is it would be the largest infrastructure project in Canada, I think, at that stage. So there's a lot of work that we have to do to plan, but we are starting that. We've started that work a while ago. Now we're in the process of better understanding the resources and making plans to help proponents who want to work in our offshore understand the opportunity, understand the environmental constraints, and understand all the other ocean users that we all have to consider in this process to develop these resources.
I've spoken with engineers who will suggest to us, David, that 20 years is probably a better time frame than 4 or 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think that we have seen offshore take a long time in other jurisdictions, and that was at an earlier stage in the offshore industry as a whole. But globally, offshore wind is deploying, I think we'll have deployed approximately 80,000 megawatts by the end of this year. So we're moving at a different speed because the industry is much more established. There are more boats that can do the deployment. There are more skilled laborers who know exactly how to install offshore wind. There are more manufacturers, both in Europe and in China and in the U.S., that can provide some of the products that are necessary. So I think the industry as a whole is very different than it was 20, 30 years ago when it started in Europe and the North Sea. We are seeing very substantial projects, in the United States, off of West Virginia. Not that they don't have different challenges, but the know-how is there. The industry is there, and the demand is there. So I think those are the pieces that differ today from where the industry was 30 years ago, where this was a bit, it was new technology. It was like talking about onshore wind here in Nova Scotia in the year 2000. It's like, well, that seems unlikely to grow very fast or grow very big, but 25 years later, it's the lowest cost resource. We can deploy it faster than anything else, and we're seeing it build at great speed. The same is true for the offshore industry. They have really stepped up and have found ways to make this work more quickly, because that's what the world is demanding, is that this clean, large-scale resource can be deployed fast. That's its competitive advantage.
David, we're out of time. I appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, no, thanks very much for the opportunity.
That is David Miller, Executive Director of Energy Planning at the Government of Nova Scotia's Department of Energy. When we come back, we just talked about wind. How much wind are we going to get this weekend? And what about that snowstorm next week? Our meteorologist, Allister Aalders, will join us after the news. All right, welcome back as we roll along here on the fabulous Friday of the program. And this is our traditional time to welcome into the studio, and this time on the phone, our meteorologist and friend, that is Allister Aalders. Allister, how are you, sir?
Happy Friday, Dan. Doing well. How are you?
You gave us sunshine today. I think people are happy.
Oh, it is a beautiful day out there. I mean, hardly a cloud in the sky. Temperatures are at least in the city, rising above the freezing mark. It's not the same for everyone today in terms of the temperature. I mean, it's actually quite the contrast. Parts of the North Shore and Cape Breton are well below the freezing mark today, but Halifax above freezing, the South Shore and Southwest above freezing. So, hey, we will take it, especially for what is, I guess, mid-February, getting towards late February now.
All right, Allister, before we get into the impending doom that is a storm that's coming up here next week, I'm kidding. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect in the short term here, and that is the weekend forecast.
Getting lost in a bit of the talk about the later Monday storm is a system that will brush by tonight. It will move to the east of Cape Cod and continue to develop now for Halifax. It's really not a storm by any stretches, and it won't have a significant impact, but likely 2 to 5 centimeters of snow for HRM, the highest amounts in the city and along the coast, beginning overnight tonight, and that snow likely to continue as we go through Saturday morning before tapering off in the afternoon. So just a bit of an inconvenience. If you're traveling, though, the South Shore into the Southwest, there will be a bit of steadier, heavier snow, so perhaps 10 to 15 plus centimeters from parts of Yarmouth County through to Queens and possibly Lunenburg counties. So if you're traveling, keep that in mind. As we go through Saturday afternoon, we see some sunny periods developing. There is a second system that will be rotating in behind an upper level low. So it's a trough rotating around it, sinking into the region with a few flurries here in Halifax Saturday night to Sunday morning. If you're in the northern half of the mainland to Cape Breton, this will be more so a periods of snow event for you with 5 to 10 centimeters. So there's a bit of everything on the go for the start of the weekend. Sunday is looking better overall. And like I said, Halifax is not really getting into stormy weather, just the snow overnight into Saturday morning. Some flurries Saturday night to Sunday. Otherwise, it's fairly quiet. Colder tomorrow, -5 for the high. But then the freezing mark for Sunday, we'll have that chance of morning flurries and then some sunny breaks Sunday afternoon.
And then it begins, right? Monday, it looks like at least the morning commute's going to be okay as everybody gets back to work and back to school. But the afternoon commute looks like it's in the target of this next system.
Yeah, it looks like morning commute, as you mentioned, should be fine. It's looking like a cloudy start to the day, but unless there is a significant change in the speed of the system, it looks like the snow in Halifax will hold off until the afternoon. And I do think, the heavier snow with the system looks to likely hold off until the evening, but obviously only takes a bit of snow to make that drive quite messy. We saw that on, I believe it was Wednesday morning, where we had, a very quick blast of snow that didn't amount to a whole lot, but it caused a lot of problems on the road. So that afternoon drive, Monday and Monday evening, not looking great. Seeing fair agreement that this system will likely impact us. The track is still somewhat unclear. How close does it get to Nova Scotia, which will impact how much snow we receive, and also if there's any mixing involved, which some models are indicating. The drive to work on Tuesday likely impacted as well because the system will be lingering into Tuesday morning before it tapers off later in the day. So that Monday commute home and that Tuesday commute to work, if if indeed, things are going on Tuesday morning, which obviously cancellations and delays are certainly possible given the timing of the system and the amount of snow we could see. A lot of people probably opting to work from home that day, but obviously targeting those 2 commute times if you do have to be out on the roads during this system.
All right, Allister, let's put the stats out there. What are we looking at snow-wise, accumulation-wise, and what kind of snow is it going to be? Is it going to be that the heartbreak or heart attack snow, or is it going to be light and fluffy?
Well, I think it's important to mention that, we're still, kind of in that 3+ day window. So there's still some uncertainty with the track and how much snow we could receive. So the numbers I'm going to say are not necessarily set in stone and could change. I mean, it certainly looks like 15 to 25 centimeters is a solid, decent range based on what I'm seeing right now. If that track comes a bit closer and we see a change over to rain, the amounts could be held closer to the 15 to 20 centimeter range. But if it holds farther offshore, I would be leaning more towards the 20 to 25 centimeter range, and even the possibility of amounts being higher if it held offshore. Now, I not sure which way I'm leaning towards on the guidance right now, just because I am still waiting for all of the new model data to come in. The Canadian model seems to hold a changeover to rain offshore, but the American model's been indicating perhaps a changeover to rain, and we'll get the European model coming in over the next hour. So generally speaking, looks like 15 to 25 centimeters, but where exactly the system tracks will be key to how much snow we do receive. And then obviously wind associated with the system will likely be strong, gusting upwards of 60, 70, possibly 80 kilometers per hour as the low moves through late Monday and into Tuesday morning from the northeast, and then becoming north and northwesterly behind it. Temperatures, as I mentioned, you asked if it was, a fluffy snow or, the back-breaking snow, but given there is that chance of mixing with rain, temperatures will likely be fairly close to the freezing mark, -1 or 0, and then obviously if we change to rain, above the freezing mark. So this will be not the Superman snow that you're able to just throw away with ease. It will likely be, a more normal to wetter snowfall for Halifax.
Superman snow, eh?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I heard, maybe it was a meteorologist, Ryan Snodden at CBC, maybe referenced it as Superman snow one time. I can't remember exactly who, so I'm sorry if I'm miscrediting, but that always stuck with me, because that's kind of what it's like. I mean, when it's very light and fluffy, you can just toss it away with ease. But these heavier snow events that we've had the last couple of times, or at least a few times this winter, I mean, it just makes it very challenging to clear. And I know people are getting very tired of dealing with it.
Well, Allister, we'll keep our eye on the weather. We'll listen to your forecast. That'll be later on this afternoon from 3 until 6 on the wheels, and we'll keep an eye on the weather for Monday afternoon into Tuesday. Until then, my friend, have a good weekend.
You too, Dan, and I'm sure we'll be talking on Monday at some point.
Likely. All right, man. That is Allister Aalders. He is our meteorologist, and as mentioned, you can hear his forecasts right here on both the morning and afternoon commutes. And we'll be keeping us up to date on what's happening with this storm. I don't like the sound of the latter end of that. Do you? 25 or more? Let's hope that track changes and this is a much lighter event than it could be, because I know I am, and I know Vanessa is, and I know many of you are just about done with shoveling snow, right? Time for us to take a break. When we come back, if we can peel him away from his television screen, a conversation with our sports guru, Cecil, will be joining us. We'll talk Olympic hockey, curling, and much more. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We are back in minutes. Certainly lots Lots to talk about when it comes to the world of sports as the Olympic Games in Italy continue and begin to wind down, and we get to these all-important and critical games like the one we saw yesterday, like the one that's on right now, particularly on the hockey rink and on the curling sheets. And I know that our sports guru, Cecil Wright, has probably got about 3 TVs going right now and watching it all, aren't you, Cecil?
I got one TV that's going right now, so let's hurry this up so I can get back to giving the boys my mojo.
Fair enough.
They need it.
Oh boy! And just grabbed the score quickly before I came in. It's I'm not going to say it looks grim for Canada, but they're certainly down a couple goals.
They're down a couple goals to a good team. Finland, they're no joke, and neither are the Swedes. You know, like the whole hockey world has really come along, men and women. We saw that yesterday. But, you know, when you have a leader like Sidney Crosby unable to play, that hurts your team. And you can't tell me that everybody else can make up for his loss. There's no way you can. That's like the Montreal Canadiens of years ago making up for the loss of Guy Lafleur.
Right.
You might want to, but you can't. You don't make up for a talent like that. Everybody else has to work harder, yes, but you still cannot overcome that loss.
And even a talent aside, just having that on the bench, right, to give you a whack in the head or put his arm around you to try and keep you motivated, because I mean when Sidney Crosby speaks, everybody listens.
Well, apparently he addressed the team before they went out for the third period yesterday or the day before, whenever the hell it was. So I give him credit there, but still you can't replace what he provides on the ice. And I guess, it's just a bad luck thing that happened. I don't think it was anything intentional. But as soon as he went down, my heart was in my mouth.
Yeah, it didn't look good. And the shot of his mom in the stands certainly reinforced that. Cecil, obviously still a long way to go in that hockey game. And yeah, you're right. We'll add our mojo to it here when we're done talking. That being said, the women's hockey game yesterday, the gold medal game, Canada went into that game as a large underdog. The Americans have essentially owned Team Canada for the last couple of years. They beat them 5-0 in the preliminary rounds. And Canada, for whatever reason it is, when it comes to that gold medal game, can always find that extra gear, right?
Well, let's give some credit to our good friend Troy Ryan from Spryfield, Nova Scotia, and the rest of his coaching staff, because they've done a magnificent job with those ladies.
Corey Chevrier from up in Pictou County, yeah.
That's right. Blair Turnbull, another Nova Scotian on the team. But I do want to say this. Marie-Philippe Poulin is just an incredible hockey player. And I know that we're all looking at the Connor McDavids of the world and the Sidney Crosbys and, the Macklin Celebrinis. But this lady is, as far as I'm concerned, she's right up there on the same pedestal with all those guys. She's a fabulous hockey player, and I felt so bad for her, just watching her crying at the end of that game, man. That hurt my heart, because I know how much she's put into it just to get out there and play with her bad leg.
And we often talk about leadership, right? We often talk about leaders and locker room leaders and people that, like Sidney Crosby we just talked about, that can put a team on their back. But I think that when it comes to Marie Poulin there, she certainly is the epitome of a leader. She hugged every one of her players after that game, right? And like she really understands the role that she plays. And man, to take that to overtime and to hold off the Americans 3 minutes, they needed 3 minutes more, right? It was that's just the most heartbreaking way to lose.
Especially because they had a couple chances that they weren't able to cash in.
Right.
But I noticed that they were starting to wear down a little bit because they couldn't get the puck out of their own end very cleanly in the third period and the overtime.
Right.
And I give the Americans all the credit in the world. I hate their president, but I give them credit as far as their athletic ability.
Oh, they're a great team. They have an absolutely great
goodness,
team.
Wouldn't I just have jumped for joy if we had knocked them off?
Oh boy, it would have been something else. Cecil, I got to ask you. I opened this up earlier in the show today. The IIHF rules, or at least the Olympic Association rules, when it comes to overtimes in the gold medal game going to a 3-on-3. The NHL doesn't even do that. It's just a terrible way to lose a hockey game.
They do it in the regular season, but not in the playoffs.
Right.
And I agree. It should be 5-on-5 hockey. That's the way hockey was meant to be played. And if there's a penalty, call it.
Right.
But don't call something that's marginal. If you have to, you call something that's egregious. But otherwise, you let the two teams decide who's the best team on the ice.
You said last week, Cecil, that you got into curling. Have you been watching the current curling playoffs?
I've been watching it. I feel bad for Rachel Homan, but at least they're playing for a medal.
Right.
And I think that's something too. I'm going to say this. It's going to be controversial. I think our Canadian fans, I love us all, but we expect nothing but the gold. And I think that's really a slap in the face of all the other great teams around the world. I respect our Canadian athletes, our curlers, our hockey players. If we don't get the gold medal, it doesn't mean that it's a total loss. That means that other teams are catching up to us, and we got to work that much harder. It's all it means. It's not a bad thing.
Brad Jacobs will curl for gold in the final of the men's tournament. Rachel Homan losing to Sweden today, and we'll play the Americans for bronze in that match. And we'll certainly be watching that one as well. See, switching gears on you a little bit, just to get you back to the hockey game as quick as we can here. Spring training is this weekend. We get spring training baseball.
Today.
Yeah.
Today, I'll be watching my Red Sox go up against the mighty Northeastern University Huskies today. I love it.
It's, it's a long, the preseason in baseball just seems to be so very long.
Well, it's going to seem a little longer this year, too, because the World Baseball Classic is
right.
Going to be going on. And I don't want to say all the good players, but many of the best players are involved in that. So you won't even be seeing them for a couple of weeks in spring training. And I'm a little concerned about the timing of this. I don't think they should be having a tournament that they play with as much meaning as they do the World Baseball Classic when guys aren't 100% yet. These guys are just starting out, so you're going to have pitchers like Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens are going to be, throwing 100 miles an hour. And are their arms ready? Are they prepared for that yet? I don't know.
Not to mention lower backs and groins and those kind of things, right?
That's right. All kinds of physical ailments can crop up on you.
It's one of those signs of spring, though, right? When we start to see. Baseball, I get it. They're preseason grapefruit, whatever you want to call it. But it just makes it feel like summer when we see baseball again.
Absolutely, and I love that. And I'm gonna throw a quick shout out to two of my buddies, Ty Doucette, who's in training with Cincinnati, and Tyler Boudreau, who's in spring training with the New York Yankees. I hate that, man. I hate that.
Oh, Cecil, the world doesn't revolve around the Red Sox. I hate to break it to you, man.
I have news for you. Oh, yes, it does.
and the Blue Jays will kick off their run here this weekend or this week as they continue spring training. As long as we can keep our roster healthy. It seems every time I open the sports page, there's another Jay gone for the year.
Well, and it's going to be challenging this year because that American League East, man.
Wow.
Holy cow, I don't think I've ever seen it as strong as it is now.
Yeah, usually there was a couple of gimmies, right? Like the Orioles of old, and now it's everybody is competitive and will beat each other up before the playoffs.
Even Tampa Bay,
right.
Everybody says, they're not going to – those guys surprise you every year.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't overlook them either.
Cecil, my friend, I appreciate your time. Go back, watch a hockey game.
Bye.
All right. Cecil Wright in a hurry to go watch Team Canada, who is on the ice right now in the second period of play and taking on Finland in the semifinal game, with the winner advancing to the gold medal match. We'll be watching that one closely, as I know many of you out there are doing today. And despite my concerns about the Olympics and Canada not performing as well as I think it should across the spectrum of sports in the winter, I think that we should be near the top of the medal podium, if not in the top three positions, just based on the fact of our climate here and that we are a Nordic-ish country. I continually get inspired by these athletes watching the events that we don't get a lot to see a lot here on a regular basis, right? We don't get to see a lot of the skiing events and the cross country events, and I just got handed to me here right off the press, hot off the presses. Breaking news before we send you on your way for a Friday afternoon. Canadian speed skater Valerie Malte has won a bronze in the women's 1,500-meter long track speed skating final. So, in case you missed it, Canadian speed skater Valerie Malte has won a bronze in the 1,500-meter long track speed skating final. Congratulations to her, and congratulations to all the athletes who had an opportunity to represent the country at the Olympic Games. It's a lifelong dream for most athletes out there, and they got to live it. That's pretty cool. So we'll keep an eye on Team Canada, and hopefully they'll be able to pull things out here. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Get out there and enjoy what we have here in Nova Scotia. We're so very lucky to live where we do. My thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass. Awesome job as always. Until Monday, folks, have a great weekend. Be well, and remember, be kind to one another.